Welcome to One Star Bazaar, where we review the movies critics hate. This week we have a special guest joining us, the film critic for the City Journals here in Utah, Dan Metcalf.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We are so thrilled that you came to speak with us, so thank you so much for being here. So I do want to start it off with, as you know, we look at movies that have a 40% or less on Rotten Tomatoes and or Metacritic. So what is the worst movie you've ever seen?
Well, it's a trick question because there's so many. And, every year, as a matter of fact, a lot of people say, oh, you're a film critic. That was so awesome because you get to see all these free movies. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's true. But I always say there's like a 1-to-4 ratio. You got to see like 4 awful, crappy movies before you get to one good one because there's so many movies now coming out.
There are.
That the ratio of good to bad is widening. So, I mean, really it is.
Yeah.
So I say to myself, oh, wow, there's a lot of bad films that come out. Some years, and in fact, I make a best list and a worst list every year.
Yeah, I did check that one out this time.
Yes. And I had my my worst list was A Wrinkle in Time. Worst this year was A Wrinkle in Time. So if you ask me today, the worst film of 2018 was A Wrinkle in Time. It's pretentious garbage. It was an Oprah worship device, and it was just ridiculously overblown and terrible. So that's what I tell you is my worst now. Actually, one of the worst films I've ever seen in my entire life was my worst film of last year, which was Mother.
I had not seen that. I've heard it's like very different.
And you're a better person for it. I can tell you that now for having not seen that. That's one of the most pretentious garbage films that I've ever reviewed, and it just comes to the point where every year there's that art film that everybody just adores and loves in an art film, and sometimes I'm like, you know what, I just really don't care about your religious views, so-and-so author, director, or maybe, and that was one of them. That's one of my worst films. But if you really like, my easy answer is the worst film I've seen is the very first Fast and Furious, and pretty much every one after that. If you, my other go-to, and in fact this is on my Twitter bio, I say that Michael Bay is the reason we can't have nice things because of the Transformer movies, because I really can't stand the Transformer.
We tried watching The Age of Extinction, and we fell asleep. Like, I've never fallen asleep in a movie.
Well, we have that in common, because I did too. And then the Knights one from last year was just terrible. Now, that said, guess what happens when you remove Michael Bay from the equation?
Yeah, it turns out to be
Bumblebee,
good.
And it was actually pretty good. It was not terrible.
We did. I was talking to another podcast about it, and I was like, is it possible that the thing at the end where they say you could have been a Camaro all along was like a metaphor for the franchise as a whole? Of like the franchise was the beat up gross bug, and then Bumblebee is this awesome Camaro that everybody likes.
Yeah, so those are my go-to worst. But I mean, the first Fast and Furious just bothered me on a moral scale.
Yeah.
And just to the point where, so basically, the moral of the story is, if you're an FBI agent who looks like you're 14 years old, and you're going after the bad guys, people that actually rob and steal and hurt people, and they're a bad gang, and you get bed with them and you get to know them, and you get busy with the gang leader's sister, it's okay to let them go.
Yeah.
That's basically, I'm like, why did I waste? I seriously, and the funny thing was, back in the day, I actually rented it from Blockbuster. Blockbuster used to have the deal where if you went to the theater, went to the rental store, and they didn't have it, they would give you a rain check. So you get this for free, but you got to come back later and get it. So I hadn't seen it in the theater, so I thought, I'm going to go check out this Fast and Furious movie. I hear so many cool things about it. And so I actually used my rain check, and I actually got it for free. So I thought to myself, I still feel ripped off for having used gas in my car to actually go to this place and get it for even free. I hated that film so much. And
your time, too. Like, sometimes we feel like movies are so bad that we want those 2 hours of our lives back after watching it.
Yeah.
So I'm sad that you had that experience with Fast and Furious.
I did, but there's a lot of movies that are inherently bad on their face, and you can tell they are. So I don't really, I give them a bit of a break, because to me they're just like, they're bad because they didn't try. Yeah. But movies that try hard, like Mother, even like Fast and Furious, they were trying hard and they really fell flat in their face. I mean, seriously, to me, they did.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's a distinction we make too, is like, we're not interested in the B movies. We're not interested in the low budget. We want like a studio that really tried to make a good movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually, when my first year, when I used to do my best and worst list, I would do my best, worst, and my middle films. I called them middle because they were like, it should have been good. And it just wasn't. It wasn't really bad either. It was just wasn't really that good, you know?
Yeah.
A film like Next with Nicolas Cage. I mean, that was actually had some moments in it. I'm like,
That's on our list.
yeah, it's like I'm thinking that had some moments in it, and then I thought, what a piece of garbage at the end. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
things like that. So there are movies that try hard and fail, and I give them a little bit more credit, like if they're trying hard.
Mhm.
Okay.
But when they, but if they try hard and they fail because it's just terrible, then I'm going to say it's terrible. But if you aren't trying, I'm talking about all the movies that you base on really awful 80s shows that are coming out. Chips is one of my worst films of last year. I mean, these are just awful, lazy films that are just really inherently bad on their face. So I don't really waste my time and say how things that bad they are. Now there's actually my review just went up for Glass. Now I should probably swap out Michael Bay for M. Night Shyamalan because to me, and when he started, I'm thinking I was really into him. I'm like, this guy's got a voice, he's got something new, and then I realized really what he has is a gimmick. Yeah. The gimmick is always a twist at the end. Mm-hmm. So when you know a twist is coming, it's not really a twist anymore. And that's kind of where Glass was going, and I really very disappointed in it. But actually, I wasn't really expecting. So you're like disappointed, but weren't expecting it because so it was really I didn't really like it that much.
That's bad when you go in with low expectations and then it's still disappointing.
Sometimes with low expectations, you're almost like, it wasn't actually as
like
bad.
when we saw John Carter, we were expecting it to be like the worst movie of all time, and it was good.
Actually, I actually gave that an A-. I actually like that movie a lot. I mean, and that's one of those movies that most critics hated. And it had a huge budget, and I actually liked it. I thought this wasn't that terrible. I mean, I bought into it. I didn't lose too much.
Honestly, the main problem with that movie, I thought, was the title. Because John Carter, like, for all you know, it's a biography about one of the founding fathers. Because nobody knows who, like, John Carter is the most generic
Mars,
name.
It would
or
have
just
been better.
the name of the book was Princess of Mars.
Yeah.
Just call it, even John Carter and the Princess of Mars, although that sounds like a David Bowie album.
Yeah, but well, actually, the original title was John Carter of Mars. It was the original title of the movie. And to be honest with you, that movie was less of a failure of the film, but it wasn't the marketing.
So
it really was it was a failure of marketing. So that was one of those things that just blew the water because of that. But also, take for instance, like big budget movies that flop sometimes. They flop not because they tried. Not because they're terrible or they're bad ideas or they're poorly executed. They were overdone in terms of having too many cooks in the kitchen. Like the studio came back and completely messed it up. Think for Fantastic Four from 2 years ago. 3 years ago. I mean,
which he has not seen, but I have, and
that thing is just totally microwave garbage. It was terrible, and you can tell the parts where the studio came in and said, "Oh, we're gonna have to add this whole new part, and this whole new angle, and things like that." So those kind of things are disappointing and things like that. Take for instance the last what was Spider-Man, the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man thing that got overdone. I mean, it got completely overmanaged and mismanaged. So those sort of things happen. Also, I found myself biased as well for movies when they're released. So when I look at a movie and I go, "Oh, it's being released in January." That must mean the studio has a lot of faith in that one. They want to put it out in the theaters when nobody goes to movies. That's what they really want to do.
Yeah.
But that's changing now, and I think you probably have a thought about this, about the quantity of movies coming out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's actually January is the death sentence it once was. But there still are some garbage in there.
Especially because all it takes is one studio to say, "Hey, what if we release our one good movie in the middle of all these garbage movies? It'll be the one that everyone goes and sees."
Yeah.
So eventually kind of the market will correct any issues like that, right?
But you also find out, and the thing is that when it's being released, you'll find out that there's now the summer movie season starts in March now.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't end until it ends in August. Trust me. There's some hot garbage that comes out in August usually, but sometimes there's some really good movies that come out in August. 2 years ago, same day, Hell or High Water and Kubo and the Two Strings, two of my favorite films of that year, were released on the same day in August.
Yeah.
Actually, the first M. Night Shyamalan movie, The Sixth Sense, was an August release, and it's one of the highest grossing August releases of all time. So there's some surprises in there. Now, I think the Lego Movie was a movie that came out in February. Black Panther was released in February.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, these are things that happen there. So the market's changing a bit, and they're understanding that the audiences want it now. Mm-hmm. And so that time of year doesn't really matter as much.
Okay. The next question, I guess.
Next question.
So do you have a favorite movie that would surprise people? Like people would say, "Wait, a film critic likes this?"
Well, there's some movies out there, and there's a couple, and maybe you've not heard of them, that I have to watch it every time it comes up. One is a Richard Dreyfuss movie from the 90s, or maybe it's the early 2000s, called Let It Ride. I don't know if you've seen it.
I haven't heard of that.
Oh my heavens, it's a funny movie. It's a fun movie because it's just nuts. It's crazy, but it's one of those movies where, I mean, it's based upon this habitual gambler. His life is in shambles, and one day he just hits a lucky streak.
Yeah.
And he gambles on horse races, and his friends are around him just saying, "All right, dude, you can't." He won a race, so you're like, he won something, and so it's like, you don't mess it up. He says, you know what? I'm going to totally ignore everything I'm not supposed to do. I'm just going to let it ride. And so he goes through all this Gamblers Anonymous stuff and all these people in his life, and he just keeps going back to the horse track on the same day. Mm-hmm. And so you think at the end, okay, he's setting up for a big failure, and it's just a lot of fun. I really like that movie a lot. That's one of those things that's obscure, and it has one of those that were released in the middle of some other time. You really see it.
Yeah.
So that's one of those. But the other one is one of my favorite movies of all time is The Black Stallion, the Francis Ford Coppola movie. And that was another movie that was not a very big box office hit, but it was from 1980. It was back their way. So yeah, that's one of those movies that I've always loved and adored. And of course, I whenever people talk about one of my favorite movies of all time is True Grit, the Coen Brothers version. Okay. So
the remake that we saw. Yeah.
No, and that's the thing. It's not a remake. It's actually it's actually closer to the book sort of doing. Yeah. So they didn't redo a John Wayne movie. They actually went to the book source and started over from scratch, which is one of the movies I really love. I can watch that movie anytime.
So I think we'll have to watch Let It Ride because it has a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes, a 33% on Metacritic, and yet 95% of Google users like it. So you're onto something there for sure.
Yeah, I think it's one of those failures of marketing, failures of time of year it was done.
Yeah.
But if you watch it and have a little bit of, I had a little fun with it. I thought it was pretty funny, and they had some funny, quirky characters in it.
So how have aggregate sites like Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic kind of impacted your reviews? Like you kind of mentioned that the traditional critic model doesn't really exist anymore. Like you can't just be a critic and have that be your thing. Mm-hmm. So do sites like that make it harder to be a film critic?
I'll be honest with you. I actually usually ignore them. I really do. In fact, the only time I actually look at them is sometimes when an argument comes up about, well, somebody said, well, you like this movie, nobody else did. Well, I go, look, well, wait a minute. You're totally wrong, and you're entitled to your wrong opinion. But here's the thing about aggregate, especially Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes is prone for chicanery, in the nicest way to put it.
Yeah.
Because you have now, there's a couple cases of point. Take, for instance, Star Wars Last Jedi. So you basically had people actually creating bots. You actually have people, a smear campaign to make it have a lower rating. And it was proven. And they came out and even admitted they were doing that. So I think there really sometimes it's open for tomfoolery or whatever you call it. That's one of the things I don't like about it. Those are great. I think they're a great tool if you really want to decide whether or not to put the $12 down on a full ticket. Mm-hmm. I guess that's okay.
I guess kind of the part B to that question is, it's with the age of the internet, it's so much easier for a viewer to just look up a score and go, okay, this movie's good or bad.
Right.
Why do I need to read some critic's review?
Right. Yeah. And I think the fact that it's aggregate is important. And so sometimes if you go through and you read, like for instance, there's some critics I actually go to because I respect what they do. I don't agree with them all the time, but I know they've done their homework. And I know that they actually are not biased, at least in a way that toward, they don't have an axe to grind, so to speak. Some do. Some of it's political. I mean, some of those things are out there. And sometimes films get better reviews because of political reasons and things like that. But for the most part, I understand what you're saying. Mm-hmm. We're saying that why would people need to care what I think? Well, that's not what you do to build an audience. A critic's job is to build an audience and to get a voice. And so if you stick to that, I think you can accomplish that. I hope I'm doing that. But for the most part, since, like I say, film criticism is like not a big monetized, wonderful, career opportunity. The people that do it like myself, we do it out of a passion for movies. And so I believe that people who do have a passion for movies are going to find each other. So I don't have a problem with that.
Well, here we are. We found each other.
Yeah, look at us.
Yeah, we've definitely found that that's true. There's so many and even like people in the industry, like there's a bunch of actors who have a movie review podcast where they look at bad movies just because they're trying to figure out like where it went wrong or
here's what not to do.
Yeah. But yeah, I think people who do love movies are really like a big community, and they do kind of gravitate towards each other for sure.
And same with the group. I belong to the Utah Film Critics Association, and like I say, I don't agree. I don't always agree with them. I really don't agree with the selection of last year's best film, but I totally agree with it this year.
Yeah.
But to me, I will look at them straight in the eye and say, you're wrong about that. I don't care, but I respect you. And I think, like I say, people that we do it, we respect each other's opinions, even though we don't always agree.
So one of the things you did mention was that there are just so many movies.
Oh my goodness.
So do you think with the addition of streaming services like Netflix or Hulu or Amazon trying to make their own original movies, is there just enough out there now that it causes like a negative or positive effect on the industry as a whole?
Well, I think as when you add more content to any situation, you always run the risk of diluting it, and I think that is a concern. But because of these streaming services, they're able to monetize it. So if you can monetize it and get it out there, that's great. Case in point, for instance, this year is the first year as a film critic. We get sent screeners discs before the films come out, but we are sent screeners to discs that are going to be on Netflix next week because they're being also released in theaters so that they'd be eligible for awards consideration.
Right.
Roma is one of them. Bird Box, the one that's out now, those are both Netflix movies, but they also did release in theaters at the required places and times so that they could get into the discussion. Yeah. In fact, we were begged by the studio reps, please go to see Roma in the theater. It will be such a great experience for you. And I'm like, yeah, but I had something else going on. I couldn't make it. I had that family emergency come up, and so I was like, I'm just gonna wait for it on Netflix. And I did watch it on Netflix. Actually, they sent me a disc screener. I watched that first. So, and it is one of the best films of the year. I really believe it's this. Alfonso Cuarón is one of his masterpiece in terms of art, in terms of what he's trying to say in his voice and cinematography and those things. So, yeah, it does complicate things a little bit, and it does make things feel a little less. I think until Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and those folks that are making these originals and doing things like that have a strong enough foothold in terms of awards consideration. I think that's when they get legitimized that way. If they can get legitimacy through the awards considerations and things like that, I think that's going to happen this year. I think Roma is going to take a pretty good chunk of at least a few awards in the Oscars. So that's a Netflix movie. We
were talking just the other day with another podcast who all they do is watch stuff on Netflix. It's not necessarily Netflix originals, but it's just things available on Netflix. They just have a roulette
randomizer that just picks.
And one of
basically, yeah, exactly.
Wow. They've seen some garbage.
I've seen there's some garbage on there. I just tell you right now.
But one of the things we were talking about is if maybe critics have some sort of bias against movies that are released straight to streaming.
I think there was a time. Yeah, I think it could have been. But for the most part, if they go to the effort to make sure. The studios go to an effort to make sure that we get screened for it ahead of time. And if they just said, "Hey, this is on Netflix, check it out," no, that's not going to help.
So it doesn't have the same effect of it went straight to video versus
right. A case in point, they take for instance my favorite film of 2018 is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I think it's, in terms of what an enjoyable movie experience, it's like the most I've had this year or last year. So I'm saying to myself. When I first saw my perception of that, when I first saw it being made, it's like, oh, this seems like something that's being direct-to-video that was just good enough to get to the theater, and it wasn't that way at all. It was planned all the way, and it was really well executed, well done, well written, well conceived, and really kind of a great communal experience, I guess, for people who are fans of comic books and superheroes. Yeah. So that and those who aren't. So. Yeah, there are perceptions there, and there are still going to be some, and I think sometimes it gets discounted if it's not marketed right. But in terms of film critics, it depends on how they present it to them. So if they say they hold a screening in a theater ahead of time, well ahead of time, or they send screening links or screening discs to us, and and if it's done well, I don't think it discounts it in any way. I think there's plenty of folks out there that. And critics out there that do completely adore Roma, and this is something that's made to be released on Netflix. Last year, movie not Mud.
Mudbound.
How was that? Mudbound was another film that was made just for Netflix, and it was one of my favorite films of the year. I thought it had some really good performances in it, but that was one that was not marketed correctly to the critics, and so I think that it depends. It's a finesse situation. If it's done right, they can maintain their legitimacy.
Yeah.
But sheer numbers, yeah. I mean, if it's so many. So if 3 or 4 is okay, but if there's going to be 10 in a Christmas season, because that's usually when the Oscar bait movies come out, so they call them Oscar bait. That's a bad term, but if they do too many of them all at once, it could be a problem. People who need to get out and have an experience, that I think there's still enough out there. The thing is, I think there'll always be a market for it.
Oh yeah.
We talk about that a lot. It's like, what is this movie worth? Like, getting a babysitter, going out for 2 hours to go see it, or should we just wait when we can watch it in the comfort of our own home? Like some visual movies, like what was the one we mentioned most recently?
Oh,
no, it wasn't
what was the one we most recently
so we did physically go to the theater to see Aquaman, because one, like on a tiny screen, this special effects aren't going to look as cool.
Yeah.
And it's more of like an experience versus like,
right.
I'm not going to go out to the theater to see like a rom-com or something like that.
Well, there's a couple examples too. Like, for instance, Roma is another one. I mean, the sound editing, I understand in that, and I loved it from seeing it on my home theater system. It's great, but the buzz is that the IMAX or the film experience with the surround sound or whatever it may be, the theater experience for Roma is even more intense because of the sound. It's incredible. Another movie is I wish that more people could see it. It's the rock climbing documentary.
Free Solo?
Yes, Free Solo. I saw that on a tiny screen on a computer, but I'm telling you that is a movie worth seeing in IMAX. I mean, that is I would love. In fact, I would pay money to go see that in IMAX because actually, I'm not sure if I would because I have a total fear of heights. But it was thrilling to watch, and it's a documentary that I was actually into so deep that I was actually like on the edge of my seat. You don't get that usually with documentary.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really it is sort of a real life experience documentary. So this kind of like that. So there's always going to be an experience that to be had only in a theater.
Your rock climbing documentaries get me. Like I saw Meru. Did you see that one?
In fact, it's the same filmmakers. I think.
Yeah, I was just like glued to the screen the whole time. I was like, what? Why are you doing this?
Yeah. And the other thing too, by the way, number 2 on my list after Spider-Man, by the way, is Won't You Be My Neighbor from my 2018 films.
I wanted to see that really bad.
Well, you'll be able to see it on PBS in a few months. I think they're actually pulling it out on PBS. So I'm telling you, in the world there was so much division and no way civil to each other. There's so many documentaries being made that show the problems of the world. This is a documentary that offers a solution.
Yeah.
And that's one of the beautiful things about it. And it's done through a simple, wonderful man who had nothing but purity in his heart. And so that sort of thing is the thing that we need. So there's something. I saw that in the theater, but that's an okay movie to watch at home.
Yeah.
Right? You get the same great experience at home. So those are always some things you can do.
So when it comes to the way you look at movies, we talked a little about it a little bit, is how you kind of tend to think of the movie more from the audience perspective of whether or not the audience is going to like it.
Well, not so much like it, but give them enough information to make an informed choice. That's really what my goal is. Just to make an informed choice. Just give them enough information. Okay.
And do you think most critics do that, or are you a little bit more unique?
I think I'd have to think. I think I think I am. I think I'm more unique than anybody else in this room. But no.
Well, that's true. We're pretty.
I do believe that it depends on what kind of voice you have. My voice, that's my voice, and it's different. It's unique. It's what it may. There may be critics who, and I think most critics do consider their audience. For instance, a lot of critics and some critics frown on this practice, and I'll say, this is the qualifier. Critique, the qualifier review. So if you're a kid, you might like this movie, right? Or if you're into blood and gore and violence, and you like seeing people decapitated, this might be a movie for you,
right?
Okay. There's too many qualifiers in there, right? So for me, I do go down that road and say, okay, this movie might look like a kid's movie, but it's not. Here's why. That's why I'm trying to say. So this is sort of a warning voice that I might have. Or I might have to say, this movie was marketed this way. But it isn't. It's not. It's like far from the truth. It's not really what it is. And there's some movies that are just so abhorrent in some of the content in it, and they try and slide it in there, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to tell you about that. I mean, seriously. I mean,
right.
There's a warning voice to be had, and I feel like I have been given sacred, duty here. It's been my opportunity to be the warning voice for those things. But I don't consider myself that all the time. I go to movies because I like them. I tell what I like about them. I tell what I don't like about them. That's okay. Yeah. But there's an element to that where I always try to consider the audience. And I think I think most critics would be silly not to. So if you go out there and say, I'm going to tell you how much I know about art film, and I'm going to tell you all about this and that, and that's great. And if that's your audience and you speak to the audience, that's great. But if you don't understand, or you're not trying to expand your audience and make it more of a general thing, that's great. So if you're writing for IndieWire or something like that, yeah, you can come out and say, this is why art people like us love this sort of thing. Yeah. But I'm not so snobby that I have to think. And that's the thing. And I don't want to talk down any critic, because some of them pick some films that I go, okay, it's your critique, it's your list, however. And I think to myself, that's pretentious garbage to me. But on the other hand, I still respect them to say that we can agree on other things. So I really don't want to knock down the critics. I think they do a different thing, different ways.
Because one of the things we like to look at is, this movie's not going to win an Oscar, but it's not a pile of garbage, it's a fairly decent, entertaining popcorn movie.
Well, I think for instance, Suicide Squad, put that out there. It won a freaking Oscar for makeup, but it was a pile of garbage to me anyway. I thought it was a pile of garbage. So a lot of people may have liked it. I mean, I did not.
Yeah, we did.
I thought it was a
we saw it in theaters.
Super villain team, and the stupidest thing in the world.
Yes, we did pay money to see that movie.
Yeah, and I would have, because it had all the earmarks and it had good quality actors in it, and people in it, Will Smith notwithstanding. But anyway, it's one of those things where they have one of those, it just may be. Mm-hmm. It just may be one of those situations where you just don't know how to say this. Let me put it. Let me bring it down to you lightly. It's like this may or may not work out for everybody, but it's okay to think. You have to think. You have to think about what you're trying to do. And a lot of times you're thinking too much. And I've caught myself doing that a lot too.
Yeah, when we were watching Bright, which is a Netflix original, Jonathan was getting very caught up in the world building, because it's our world, but there's fairy tale creatures living in it. And he just was having so much trouble. I was like, you're giving it too much thought. Just, this is the world, just go with it. Yeah. And then it'll be more enjoyable.
Well, and that is a challenge. I do, and that's the problem with Shyamalan that I have. It's like he's really great at building worlds.
And he doesn't know where to go after that.
Right? He can't pay it off. His payoff is always a gimmick. And that's the problem that really I have trouble with.
So this kind of, I think, is a good segue into one of our other questions. I don't know if this is the next one on your list, but basically, do you feel like some genres can be more forgiven
for having a bad story?
Yeah, does that make sense? So you mentioned if you like this, then and we do that a lot, because we're basically
if you're into hot garbage, you love it.
Well, but if you enjoy lowbrow, gross out, crude humor, because you're 20 and you're in college, then you're going to like this movie. But obviously a 50-year-old critic writing for whatever newspaper is not going to like this movie.
It's not my thing.
You're not that target audience.
Well,
right?
I had this conflict when the Miley Cyrus movie, Hannah Montana movie came out. I'm like, oh crap, I have nobody I can take the movie with me.
Sidebar, my dad, who is a 70-year-old man, loves Hannah Montana.
So he had the Hannah Montana movie, right? So it's like, okay, so that's when you really have to qualify.
Right.
If Hannah Montana's your thing, man, this is for you.
Right. If you're a 12-year-old girl.
I can sit here and nitpick at the cinematography and the script and all these other things, but this is a Hannah Montana movie. I mean, what can you critique about that? It is what it is. There's nothing to do about that. So there's some films that are you have to qualify,
right?
Because they're qualifying in themselves on their face. I mean, they have an obvious audience. Horror film. I'm not a horror film person. I don't really like horror films, because to me horror films are pretty cliche.
They are, yes.
And I think, okay, we're gonna have a jump scare. We're gonna have this hidden thing. There's gonna be somebody evil possessed. It's gonna be. I just get so bored with it. I mean, I really do. And I'm like, okay. And then I get a jump scare. I'm like, oh, great. You got me all excited for no reason. But I do like a horror film that actually has something to say or is a little bit deeper. Some horror films are just so disturbing, but they're disturbing in a way that you like, wow, that's it. And you say that, for instance, and they also feature really great performances. Hereditary last year is one of those. I mean, it was filmed here in Utah, and it's a freak you out movie. So
yeah, we haven't seen it yet, but I've heard great things.
Yeah, but the performance, and Toni Collette's performance in it is incredible. I mean,
people are like pushing for her to get an Oscar.
Yeah, and in fact, I would not be disappointed if she were, and that's fine. So that's one of those movies you go, that okay. That's not if it's your thing. I would say if you like horror films, but you like a horror film that has something more than just the cliched stuff, this is definitely for you. And also be prepared to see some pretty disturbing images. I mean, really disturbing images. I have no idea. I mean, seriously, involving children. I mean, it's really disturbing. And then there's also a film like, for instance, I really didn't like Overlord at all.
Oh, really?
Oh, he saw that.
I did enjoy that movie.
I did not like that movie,
yeah.
But it didn't speak to me. And you have to be honest about that as a critic, too. You have to be honest. Like, this does not speak to me.
Sure.
And so that's not so much a qualifier as saying, if you're into that, that's saying one thing. But you're saying, this does not speak to me. It speaks to someone else. This is another intended audience, and it's not me.
It's like you don't like it, but you could see why other people would.
Yeah, and I can accept that. Yeah. I can accept that. However, there are some things that I think too many people in genres, you talk about genres, accept the genre for what it is. I'm into that, so I'm going to just like it. You know, I think there are actually some superhero fans out there, the comic book superhero fans out there. They're like, I'm just going to love it because it's got, you know, got capes, it's got superpowers and stuff in it, and they go to it and they go to it and they go to it. Same thing for the stupid Transformer movies. Oh my gosh, those things still keep making money, and I'm like, really, people, why do you keep going to see this? And it's like, because it's a Transformers movie. It's got talking robots in it. I'm like, but they don't have anything to say. It's the stupidest thing in the world.
Honestly, I feel like a lot of the money from Transformers does come from overseas.
Oh, of course, and that's another equation, part of the equation. Like, take for instance, Warcraft made a bunch of money. Nothing here.
We are hardcore World of Warcraft gamers, so we saw that movie.
Fingernails and a chalkboard for you?
No, I liked it.
You liked it?
Yeah.
One of the things we've talked about with that movie is basically we'd love to sit down and watch it with like my dad, like somebody who knows nothing about this.
Yeah, because we don't know if we liked it because we knew the
right. Like I know all the backstory. Like I know all this stuff, and so for me it was like, well, it was okay just because I already am familiar with it. But I totally understand how if you're not familiar with something. And it's weird. You're just like, this what? And that was my problem with Bright. Is I was like, this is too weird. I can't accept it.
Well, like Warcraft, but that made a ton of money overseas,
right?
And so, and it speaks to a different kind of audience that go to see the movie. The Great Wall, the Matt Damon thing. Oh my gosh, that was really terrible. But it made a bunch of money. And take for instance, like last year, The Meg. Here's The Meg, right? There's a movie.
Loved The Meg.
Okay.
I read the book. Like,
oh my god. There's a book? Was it a coloring book?
It was originally a book.
Oh, yes. Was it a coloring book? Sorry.
It's by Steve Alton.
Yeah. Okay. I did realize that. So, for instance, the Meg, they're constructed in a way to go, oh, we're going to make money.
Yeah.
It's built in making money. So what we're going to do is we're going to put Jason Statham, who everybody knows what they're going to get with Jason Statham. Not a very good actor, but he's certainly got a persona that people like, and he's an action star, right? We got him. But what do they really do? They sneak into there. The female lead is someone you've never heard of, but she's the Chinese Julia Roberts.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, seriously. So they know what they're doing, and they're doing that to make money, and they understand it. The China audience has just changed everything, and they'll keep making money. If they keep doing that model, they keep putting so and so in here, and then somebody you've never heard of. The Great Wall as well. Great Wall made a bunch of money, right? Here.
Yeah, I think there too might be like more of an international collaboration on movies because what used to just come out of Hollywood is now partnering with studios in Asia. Like a lot of the Dwayne Johnson movies,
Dwayne Johnson movies
are partnered with production companies in China.
The Hua brothers. You've got the Shanghai one. You've got and now you got Alibaba. You've got things coming out of the Middle East, and they're being financed that way, and so they are being used to build audiences around the world to make money. So to me, and that's one of my critiques too. When I can tell if a movie is made just to make money, it's like unless you've got a voice or something to say. I mean, you might have an enjoyable popcorn experience, but for me, I can't sit there and say, go see this movie.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but The Meg is one of them. I don't like that at all.
I just have a soft spot for creature features, so The Meg is right up my alley.
Yeah.
So I have some quotes here from you about Batman vs. Superman and Keeping Up with the Joneses.
Oh, there we go.
So he can chat to you about Batman vs. Superman.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. So... From your review,
Dawn
of Justice, would you give it a B+?
Yeah.
Most critics did not like this film.
No, I know. I was pretty generous with that.
Yeah. So you said, so the good news is Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice delivers plenty of action and epic superhero drama. The bad news is it's not a well-structured film. Such flaws don't completely overshadow the cool factor of having two iconic comic book heroes duking it out, which makes Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice worth a look and certainly worthy of being an adequate stepping stone to launch the new DC cinematic universe. Let me say first, I am a DC fanboy. When it comes to Marvel versus DC, I love DC. I mean, I like Marvel, and I basically, as a DC lover, I am heartbroken that it is so very painfully obvious that Marvel is so much better at making movies.
So they're handing their butts to them, yeah.
DC just cannot figure it out. Like, they struck gold, accidentally maybe, with the Dark Knight trilogy, and I think that's still kind of, held by many to be the gold standard of, like, this is what a comic book...
Which was basically the fault of one Christopher Nolan, who was actually a great visionary. Yes. So, yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Right, and so after that, they're just like, let's make everything like that and dark and gritty and, and it's just not, for Batman it works. For Superman, no.
And I get that. So yeah, for me, I don't have an axe to grind with the Marvel versus DC.
Sure, that's fair.
I don't care. I really don't. I don't care. I really care about whether or not they're good films.
Right.
I have bought into the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Sure.
And the reason for that is one Kevin Feige. So here's a person who's running the show.
Yes.
Okay. He understands. He had a vision. He came forth with it. It started out with Jon Favreau, and they came together and they said, well, here's our vision for an Avengers universe. Let's make it happen. And so they did that, and they stuck to it. Now, I know they made adjustments along the way, and they added to things they didn't know they were going to do. But for the most part, they stuck to it. DC they're rudderless. They really actually don't have somebody at the helm or a visionary out there. Now, they're trying with Snyder. Snyder's been kind of their guy.
See,
but he's problematic.
He sucks. I'm just going to come out and say
that's problematic because he's hit and miss. Right?
Originally, I mean, I don't know how involved Christopher Nolan originally was supposed to be, but obviously after Dark Knight, they were like, hey, he's going to be our guy, and he basically said, I'll produce it, but I'm not, with Man of Steel.
And write it. Yeah, so that's he did a lot.
But he didn't direct it, and then Zack Snyder took over, and Christopher Nolan kind of said, I'm going to go make the movies I want to make, and I respect that. I want to see what he wants to make, but Zack Snyder, the one good thing, in my opinion, he can do is action. Mm-hmm. And basically the only part of Batman vs. Superman that I actually truly enjoyed was when Wonder Woman shows up and you start getting like the kind of 300 zoom in, zoom out action, slow-mo, whatever. And I was like, okay, that's cool. This guy can direct an action scene well. But the rest of this movie is... And I was sad. I was sad because I want it to be good. Justice League came out, and basically my glowing opinion of Justice League, where I was happy to have this opinion, was, man, that was not bad. Like, it's sad where I'm like, I'm just happy it's not bad. Like, it's not good.
You put that in the headline. Hey, it's not bad. That's great. So you put that in the review instead of your letter or your star grade. It's not bad.
It could be worse.
It could have been worse. Could have been worse than the other one.
And I guess, I don't know where there's a question in here.
But
I guess discussion,
No, the discussion to me is I think it's based on expectations. So, and a lot of times, to me, my best film critique experience is when I go to a theater, I'm going to a screening, and I have absolutely no idea what that movie's about. I barely even know who's in it. I don't.
Pan's Labyrinth. I knew nothing about Pan's Labyrinth when I went to go see it, and I was like blown away.
So I do like to be surprised in a movie. I don't like, because like I say, these audiences are talking about it, they have a formula, they stick to it, and that's what they want. So I think what happens I don't think it's a term of lowering expectations, it's just eliminating them.
Right.
And I think if we can do that more often as critics, and we can do that more as audience members, then we can certainly sort through the garbage a lot faster.
At the same time, it's kind of hard to have no expectations when it's Batman and Superman, two of the most iconic characters of modern literary, whatever you want to call it.
Well, we did have that experience recently with Aquaman, because we were like, there's no way this is going to be good, but we're going to go see it. Mm-hmm. And it was very entertaining.
Well, and the crazy thing, too, like with Marvel, is, in my opinion, some of their best movies are where it's characters that nobody knows about.
Well, I mean,
Guardians of the Galaxy.
Guardians of the Galaxy is, in my opinion, the best one.
Oh, yeah. And it's amazing they pulled that off with no character development.
Doctor Strange was great.
Yeah, Doctor Strange. Well, they take for even Iron Man. Iron Man was like a C-class superhero in the Marvel universe. I mean, it's like, why'd they pick that thing?
Well, honestly, it's because they didn't have the rights to their most popular characters.
So we know that.
Well, what do we still?
Even so, he's the most unlikely of the most important superheroes in the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe. Right now, it is. I mean, he is the top. Robert Downey Jr. gets the top dollars, and that's the way it works.
Right.
But so I guess the real thing is, and I think that what I try to do as a critic is I try to divorce myself from my expectations. And that's why I don't go. It's okay. And that's why I don't seek out trailers. Now, when it comes to Marvel, I mean, they come up in my Facebook feed. And I have no way of getting around those. But if I can go to a movie without expectations, I think I can give a more honest review. If we're going to talk about film in terms of an enjoyable audience experience, it's best to divorce ourselves of expectations as much as we can, as much as possible. Sometimes you can't, and I've admitted when I can't. But yeah, it's good, and I think it's a good thing to do as a critic, to divorce yourselves of expectations. I think it's also good for audience to do that, and I think if we could do that in terms of, I think we can look at things not with a critical eye, but with an eye toward this is a film, is not something that I can control, and that's the hard thing. Sometimes people want it, because I think as the streaming services, we want things now, we want things the way we want them, and now they have an interactive movie on Netflix.
Yeah,
I mean, so these sort of things, like, oh, I can do that. So I can make my own movie. I want to make my own world. It's okay to let somebody do something. So, for instance, Batman versus Superman. I sat there and went, that's a pretty cool battle scene, and Wonder Woman showed up, kicked some butt. I'm thinking, okay, that's okay. In between, I didn't really get the justification for why Bruce Wayne hated him so much. I thought that was a little contrived. But for the most part, it was doable. I didn't have a problem with it. It's okay. And the Justice League came along and I went, I actually enjoyed this movie. I did enjoy this movie. I wouldn't go, wow, this is better than Avengers, but I'd say I enjoyed the movie, and I actually liked that movie.
Did you like Aquaman?
I not loved.
Okay, but was it better than Justice League? Or
I think I like Justice League better than Aquaman.
So another movie that you kind of looked upon more favorably than the majority of critics is Keeping Up with the Joneses, which I loved, and actually my parents even loved. So it appeals to a wide range of people. But so you'd said you'd given it a B overall. And then one thing that you will find memorable about Keeping Up with the Joneses is the chemistry and comic timing between the leading ensemble. You won't experience much art, but you can be entertained. Which I think definitely sums it up perfectly. It's not going to win anything, but it's really fun to watch.
Yeah.
And for having such great actors, so it's Zach Galifianakis and Isla Fisher are a couple, and then John Hamm and Gal Gadot move in next door and shake up their world. Is it
It's Gadot.
Gadot.
Okay. Yeah, there's a way of saying it in Israeli.
Shake up their world.
Yeah.
But it has everything you could ever want in a movie. There's comedy, there's action, there's explosions, and it has a 24% on Metacritic. I don't understand. I think that's an expectation of the critic world, and I think, and not just critics, but who that I hate to say this, but I think that sometimes people expect too much from films. They want every comedy to be The Hangover. Yeah. And they want every action film to be Iron Man, and they want everything. I think it's okay to say to yourself,
there are moments when you can be entertained in a film that it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
And those are the moments. I had some good laughs in that movie. I really did. And this is something where I should have, expectations or whatever. You leave your biases at the door. I think Gal Gadot is incredibly stunning, and I thought, to be honest with you, and this is a moment where she could actually be more of herself and less of Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
So I said to myself, I like this person.
Yeah.
And I really like her a lot because she kicks serious butt and she looks stunning doing it. So that's kind of, you can escape into that. I can get that. And then John Hamm is, he's been dinged all over the place, and I think that a lot of people think that he's just a terrible actor because he hasn't made a really good film.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's really like a TV actor.
He was, but some people are expecting him, like, for instance, or even like Bryan Cranston. Has he had a major hit yet in a film? Not really, but he's respected as an actor.
Right. Godzilla.
Yeah. But seriously, did people go to see it for Bryan Cranston? No. I mean, that's my point.
For 15 minutes.
Yeah, he was like, fine. He's like, a spoiler alert.
Yeah.
But no, but I think for the most part, but I think people, I think critics sometimes fall into that same trap of saying every movie, if it's not perfect, then I'm trashing it. Yeah. I don't think you have to sell out all the way, and that's the way I approach some films, and I say to myself, okay, I didn't really enjoy this film a lot, but there are some moments I did. There are moments in this movie where I got caught into it and I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
Keeping Up with the Joneses, I said to myself, it's a great time. For instance, if you're a husband and wife and you want to get out for a night out, this is a great date movie because you can't, as it speaks to the comedy of your, parents dealing with kids, they dealing with marital struggles and things like that. And they throw like a total farcical comedy in the middle of it, which is kind of the fun of that. Some of it cliches. The cliches are there. I mean, they're just full of cliches.
Yes.
It is. But but there is some chemistry there, and there is some moments there you go and say, it's okay. It's okay to like a film that isn't perfect.
Yeah.
I believe that's true.
Well, and we've talked about this before. It's kind of lamenting the fact that there aren't enough kind of mid-budget movies anymore, and so nobody makes rom-coms. I mean, you get them on Netflix, but then they're like the quality of like Hallmark movies.
Yeah.
And you touched on this in your review of Keeping Up with the Joneses too, that date movies really aren't made anymore.
Yeah. No,
and why do you think that is?
I think that is because I think the expectation is too high. I think the expectation is too high.
Yeah.
It has to be perfect. It has to be this. It has to be that. It's got every romantic comedy has got to be When Harry Met Sally.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
And we talked about it when we were reviewing All About Steve. Like romantic comedies as a genre, they're so cheap to make.
Right.
Maybe there's just not enough of a box office return to make it worth it.
Well, I mean, I would not consider All About Steve a romantic comedy. I would consider that a mental illness. I think that was like, seriously, that's the most inappropriate comedy I've ever seen in my life. I'm like, oh yeah, by the way, stalker alert. Anyway, but no, I mean, but there are times you can go do that. There's actually a movie called Date Night. I mean, it was the Steve Carell, Tina Fey movie.
Yes.
I didn't enjoy that as much because to me it tried too hard to do some things that are in there, and they relied too heavily on the funny faces and or personalities of the stars to pull it off.
Yes, Date Night, not to be confused with Game Night, which is
actually hilarious. I did like that movie too. I like the Game Night too. So actually, that's actually got some buzz in our critics group for screenwriting. In fact, some of our folks nominated that. So that movie was like, okay, that was fun. I get it. But sometimes some people go, oh, that movie is fun. Some of our critics walked out of, what are their names? They walked out of Robin Hood, the recent Taron Egerton one. I went, well, it was sometimes fun. I said, no, it wasn't. It was hot garbage. It was really not fun at all. It was not even fun.
We wanted to see it.
It was terrible. It was awful. Yeah. But so, yeah, to your point, I think that we raised the bar too high. Mm-hmm. And when we do that, I think we deprive ourselves of having a little bit of fun. And it's okay to do that. But that's not to say, oh, well, you're hot garbage because you like this movie. Right. I think sometimes that fear of being perceived that way is sometimes, and I can't speak for the critics, but I've caught myself doing it. I don't want to be the one that says this movie is good when everybody else hates it. Mm-hmm. And I've caught myself doing that, but I try not to. I say to myself, you know what, I'm just going to be honest. If I like the movie, that's it. But I won't tell you, say, rush out and plop down $12 a person right now and get a sitter and go see it. But if you have an opportunity to go on a date, this fits the bill.
Yeah.
Okay, so transitioning a little bit with what we've been talking about, especially all about Steve and these movies, I want to talk about comedy because this is something that's come up where we've watched some comedies, and it's really a hard question. I want to know your perspective. What makes, and this is kind of related to a question I tried to ask earlier, basically, what makes a comedy successful? Like, as far as, because the difference between a comedy and a drama has to be interesting kind of the whole way through, whereas a comedy just has to make you laugh. Even if it's a bad movie, if you laugh 10, 15, 20 times, is it successful?
I don't know if you can put a score on that. I think that, to me, what you call successful box office? Or
well, I just mean successful as, like, it was an enjoyable experience.
Yeah. I think a lot of comedies make movies because they're marketed to an audience who wants to go and see a used to be Adam Sandler movies.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to go see that movie because I'm a fan of that.
Juvenile humor.
But we know that comedies can also fail, as evidenced by the recent Sherlock and Watson.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
And they didn't screen. By the way, if they don't screen,
Holmes and Watson.
By the way, if they don't screen it for critics, that's a big red flag.
Yeah, I was like, it came out already, and it still doesn't have reviews. Like, what's happening?
It didn't have reviews because they didn't film it. Critics didn't screen it, and those that did, I mean, I think it's a 7%.
It's very low.
It's very low. But either way, so anyway, to your point, I don't judge a film as funny by how many times I laugh. I think funny to me is whether or not the entire experience was funny and enjoyable.
Sure.
So sometimes there's a gag that works, and I'll say that in my critics. Some of these gags work; they're funny, but when they don't work is when they're not smart. When you go into the lowest denominator for a laugh, you've lost me.
Sure.
Incessant F-bombs. Anything produced or anything having to do with Judd Apatow, for me, automatically, and I'm going to have a bias there, I think is terrible. He has a talent to write funny dialogue, but he really goes to the easy crutch of the F-bombs and the sexual humor so fast. And I'm not a prude in here and say, I can't make a funny joke about it or do that. But to me, if you're going to go to the lowest denominator to get that laugh, and people around you are laughing, and a lot of times people are laughing, I'm groaning. I'm like, I can't do that. That's not, to me, that's lazy.
Sure.
So they're lazy comedies and they're smart comedies. And they're hard to make because they're really difficult. Probably one of the best comedies I've seen recently is the Spider-Verse. There's some really hysterically funny dialogue in that film. And it's really, and Jake Johnson speaks most of it, but it's really, so that kind of thing to me, a comedy I don't judge in terms of the number of laughs, but the quality of the laugh.
Sure, that makes sense. I mean, I don't mean to turn it into some sort of formula, X equals success, but it's just, we've watched some comedies where I'm like, okay, I really didn't laugh very much during that movie. Yeah. And maybe it's like a sequel, and I love the first one, and I laughed a lot. And this one, I'm like, there wasn't really that much that was funny. Yeah. And that was, I mean, again, I totally agree. All About Steve is not a good movie, but I laughed enough that I was like, it was enjoyable. I can forgive the badness just because I'm like, it accomplished its goal. Its goal is to make people laugh and be a comedy. Yeah. And for me, it did that.
Well,
so that's
to me, some things are unintentional comedy, and that's the one that really that to me is the word that fits the bill there. So I mean, a lot of them are like that. But I think, like they say, comedy is hard, and the reason it is hard is because it's difficult to find that balance between the absurd and what's appropriate and something that's intelligent. So I mean, you got to have some sort of things. For instance, I think like The Hangover. The original Hangover. The others were just terrible because they stuck too close to the formula. Yeah. But the first one was hysterical funny because you let Zach Galifianakis let his personality shine through in this completely insane situation, and it was one of those great farcical funny comedies that you didn't know where it was going. Yeah. Now you know where it's going. All the sequels were terrible because they're the same thing. Yeah. And they tried the shock value too much. So I think people try. They do this. The comedy is done lazily. It's just a lazy way of getting the cheap laughs, and I don't get into that. So, for instance, if you can make me laugh, and you can make me laugh, not by only what I hear, but what I see. Edgar Wright is a good.
We love Edgar Wright movies.
Now, there's someone who knows how to make you laugh, but you may not know why you're laughing. So, for instance, he is an incredible filmmaker because he knows how to use every single portion of that frame And he can have things going on, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, things going on over here that are pretty funny that actually complement what's going on over here. So stuff like Baby Driver is another movie that I really thought was pretty. It's an action film, but it had some really funny moments in it. Logan Lucky, I love Logan Lucky.
That is one of my new favorite movies. I've watched it like 5 times, and
when I think of the scene when they're arguing about Game of Thrones with the prisoners.
Yeah,
right.
That's just bull, man.
He was supposed to come out with that 5 years ago. Don't tell me it's not available.
You have Dwight Yoakam there trying to explain, listen, it was in the book, but not in the...
Yeah.
That stuff to me is hysterical funny because you've done something that people can relate to. It's humor that's funny because if you're a fan of that kind of thing, it's something that's going on.
Yeah.
But you can make it absurd. I think that's what's great fun. So I to me, it really is about the quantity, not the quantity, but the quality, and how much. And it's not about effort either. It's really about whether or not you have a talent for bringing those things out. Comedy's hard, and to be honest with you, I'm very. It's the hardest thing for me to like.
Yeah, my thing with comedy was it's kind of where if it gets you to laugh enough, you're going to forget the parts of it that are kind of bad. And you're just going to kind of overlook it. Whereas you can look back to those like 3 or 4 moments where it's like, oh yeah, that was so funny. You'll remember that versus like, no, I was bored for 20 minutes and like was looking for my phone.
Right. Well, that's awesome.
Do you have anything you want to plug or?
Well, yeah.
Got a book, you got a blog.
No, please check out my reviews at cityjournals.com or cottonwoodjournal.com.
And you're on Twitter?
I am on Twitter. I am DanMet, DANMET. You may get some movie stuff in there, but you also get some sports and politics once in a while. Although I'm not political as much as I used to be. Actually, I'm really going for my mission on Twitter is to laugh and to find the absurdity in all of it. So I have a lot of fun with that. I have my ideals and the different. So DanMet, DANMET on Twitter, and my reviews can be found on cityjournals.com or cottonwoodjournal.com. I'd love for you to read me and share it with the world. And if you disagree, you are entitled to your wrong opinion. No, I'm not that mean. But no, seriously, I do make my list every year, and what I'd like people to look at that list and say, well, that's maybe I missed that one. Go check it out, or you're full of stuff, and great, make your own list, share it with me. I'd love to hear it. I like to hear people's lists. It's really fun to go over them.
Thank you for listening to One Star Bazaar. As always, please let us know what you think by reaching out on Facebook or Twitter at One Star Bazaar. You can visit our Patreon page to contribute to the podcast if you like what we're doing.